Alright guys, so in the last video we learned a bit about HTML. Just some basic tags, but you now know how to build up more on it and how to use more tags. Um, in this part we will learn more about CSS. So CSS is mostly used to add a more aesthetic appeal to the HTML document. HTML documents usually present the data, so for example a paragraph, but then using CSS we can style that paragraph, for example maybe change the color, um, bold the text in it, make the text underlined, and so on and so forth. So let's dive right into it. You can actually add the CSS code inside your HTML document too, but I like separating out the HTML code from the CSS code and then pulling the CSS file into the HTML file. So first, let's create a new CSS file. So now to include the CSS file in your HTML file, all you need to do is have a link tag with the rel style sheet and type text.css and give it an href. href is the path where the file is. So right now it's in the same directory, so I don't have to add any path variables to it, but if it's in a different one, you can add, so if it's in a separate directory, you can add the directory name / the file name. So now whatever we do in styles.css will be presented in the HTML document. For example, let's say if I want to change the background color of the body. So body, so let's say I want to change it to blue. So it changes it to blue. So the syntax of CSS is pretty simple. You have the name of the tag or the selectors. I'll explain what selectors are in a bit. And then the attribute reference, or what you want the attributes to be, and then the value of that attribute. If you go back to the Mozilla documentation, so Mozilla CSS attributes, if you go to CSS reference, so these are all the keywords that you can use. There's a lot of them. And if you click on any one of them, so let's search background color that we just used. So if I click on background color, it shows me how to use it. Different types you can use. So for example, instead of just giving it blue like I just did, I can have a hex value, an RGB value, and so on and so forth. It also gives you a couple of examples of how to do it. But the Mozilla documentation is very nice that way. So a very important concept in CSS when working with CSS files is selectors. And selectors are basically how you individually select an element. So for example, right now, let's say I want to color these both elements blue, but not the entire page, just these both elements. So I would select the P tag, because the paragraph tag, because this is a paragraph. And then I would say background color blue. Let's see what that does. So it changes the, actually let me change it to yellow so it's a bit more. Okay, so it changes the background color of the paragraph to yellow. But what this P tag does is it selects all the paragraph tags in your entire document and changes all the background colors to just yellow. But what if I just want to change the color of paragraph 1 to yellow, and for example, let's say paragraph 2, I want to change it to green. So you can individually select items, individually select tags or elements in your HTML body. There are a lot of ways to individually select, but I'll just go over the most important ones. So each element in HTML can have a class and an ID. So let's say class here is temp class. And let's say the class for the second paragraph is temp class 2. many elements can belong to a single class. So for example, these two paragraphs, both of them can belong to temp class. So now if I want to individually select these elements in the HTML, in the CSS file, what I can do is p dot temp class. What this will do is it'll select it'll select all the paragraph elements because of p, and then from all those paragraph elements it will select the element containing the class temp class. So let's see what this does. See, so now it only colors the attribute that has temp class. Similarly, if I do temp class 2, it'll just color the bottom one, right? So for here, we actually don't even need to put the paragraph tag. And the reason for that is CSS will now look at all the elements and select the ones that have temp class as their class name. And because we only have these two elements and only one of them belongs to temp class, it will just select that one. Correct. But in case, so this is obviously a very basic example, but if you have a lot of elements in your HTML file, you might want to have multiple elements that belong to the same tag. For example, the paragraph element can belong to temp class, and the h1 element also can belong to the same class. So let's actually see an example of that. So now, if for this h1 element, if I give it a class temp class, now the CSS file would select all the elements containing temp class as their class name, and it would color all of them. It'll change the background color of both of them yellow. Let's see what this does. Correct. So this is as we expected. But what if we want to change the background color of temp class only for the paragraph tag? In that case, what we want to do is p.tempClass. So then it will select just all the paragraph tags and then the temp class and then change the background color to yellow. Correct. So that's what expected is. Similarly for h1, if I just type in h1 here, it'll just take color the heading. Correct. So like if I type in the wrong class name, for example, if I type in h1 class 2, there are no elements containing of tag h1 which contain the class temp2. So let's see what that does. It doesn't color anything, which is as expected. Another concept in selection is ID. So all elements through HTML can have classes and ID. Classes and IDs. Multiple elements can belong to the same class, but each element should only belong to a unique ID if it has one. It's not necessary that you put down an ID for every element, but if you have one, it is necessary that it is unique. Otherwise, CSS would get confused in which element you're referring to. So instead of class, let's now look at IDs. So instead of class, I say ID is heading. So you can obviously add more stuff to the CSS. You don't need to be restricted to one element at the top. To select ID, we use the pound sign, so pound heading, and then background. Let's put it blue. The important thing to note here is for a class, we select it by using a period and then the class name. However, for an ID, we select it using a pound sign and then the ID name. So it changes the ID to blue. But yeah, those are the two most commonly used type of selections. Obviously, let's see if Mozilla has good documentation on it. So there are many ways that you can use selectors. I would definitely recommend going through at least a few of these so you have a good idea what you're doing. But these are the most common ones that you'll be using: class and ID and the tag name, obviously.